growth is expensive when you add that many employees and those locations, and now you're adding softwares, you're adding automation, all of that stuff costs money. And then all of a sudden you get a little drop in sales there. And you're like, oh, okay, now I really got to learn to be more efficient. You got to learn to make quicker decisions.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to the Small Business Mentor podcast, where we shine a light on the black holes of business growth with your host, Alan Pentz. In each episode, we explore the leaps and bounds entrepreneurs make as they push their businesses beyond the 1 million mark into the realm of professional sustainable growth. Stay with us as we navigate the journey from brute force to finesse.
Hey, welcome to the Small Business Mentor. Today on the pod, I'm excited that we're like super into pool companies right now. So I didn't tell you, Jay, we just interviewed somebody from another pool company down south. So I don't know, we're really getting deep on this industry, but we have Jay Broyer from St. Cyr. Did I pronounce that correctly? Pools?
Yep, you got it.
And you are in Middleton, Mass? And that's what, like up toward the New Hampshire, Vermont border kind of thing?
Yeah, just, in between the southern New Hampshire border and Boston. We're about, half hour north of Boston.
Okay, awesome. And thanks for being on the podcast today, Jay. It's going to be exciting, I think.
Thanks for having me, Alan. I appreciate it. This is
So tell me just like what we started interacting on X just about sort of you hitting a barrier pretty soon post acquisition of your company. Tell us just like, what were you doing before in the process of you bought your first pool company? Is that correct? So just get us through that phase up till like you kind of hit this barrier.
I've been in the pool industry for 23 years now, and it came time for me to kind of go out and do my own thing. St. Cyr was working for other people, and St. Cyr was actually the company I started with when I was 16 years old. I reached out to the owner there just because I knew he was at retirement age to see what he was doing. Because it was either that or I was going to start my own shop. And he's like, how would you like to, come down and run the retail division? Because, I kind of already got something going on with my nephew.
What year was this?
2019.
2019. Excellent. So you were like early in the search movement and you didn't know you were a searcher, but you were riding the silver tsunami before anyone knew it.
I didn't. EPA existed. I was just a pool guy that needed to grow. So what ended up happening is John St. Cyr was actually in the process of selling the business to his nephew, Brandon, who had been down in Florida doing pool routes down in Florida for a couple of years. So met up with him and say, hey, this kind of makes sense. You can handle the service and renovation side. I got the retail background to handle the store and hot tubs and all of that. And it was a great mix. So we did that in 2019. And then in 2021, opportunity came to buy one of the bigger hot tub retail locations in New England, Budget Pools, something we'd actually joked about. And the owners were just at retirement age, ready to get out as well. And we got in there through some mutual friends that I had in the industry, right in our same territory. We bought that in 2021. And then this last acquisition in September 2022 was a broker deal. It was on the market.
And that was for what kind? Like a pool installation or? That
was a pool and construction company. So it was kind of like what Middleton is, where it's service, retail, and new construction. So all three. And it butted right up against the border of our current territory. So it would allow us to extend our territory into southern New Hampshire. So it's definitely a strategic move there. And that's when we found ourselves, like, oh, okay, this thing, this is not mom and pop anymore. We gotta evolve. We gotta kind of grow up a little bit here. And so that's where the challenges started.
Yeah. Cool. So we'll get to that in a second. I just want to, so you guys now retail the pools that you install or construct. Is that correct? And do you only do that for your own or are you ecumenical?
No, we'll take on, and if you have a pool and you're in this territory, we'll take it on. So yeah.
Okay, and then I have to ask, like, how many pools do people put in freaking Massachusetts, New Hampshire? Like, come on.
Oh, there's a lot. Oh yeah, I mean, there's some big companies in the space on the gunite pool install side. I mean, you got to think the suburbs of Boston are a very high
Mhm.
income area, and so these people in the summertime they got to have a pool at their house. So we do quite a bit.
But is it more hot tubs than pools, or is it not?
We're probably the number two hot tub market, in the country, so we do a lot of hot tubs, and that's kind of what sustains us through the winter is the sale of hot tubs. Also our maintenance, we have maintenance agreements on hot tubs, hot tub repair service. So if we didn't have that, yeah, we would be a business that shut down during the winter.
So, all right. So we kind of got the picture of the company. So like when you started, you got these three acquisitions together and you kind of hit what, like 14 in total revenue? Was that sort of, and what did you start seeing at that point?
Physically, we have three separate locations spread out. And while our acquisitions of Budget Pools and Swimming Pool Center of Hampstead up in New Hampshire had teams in place, veteran teams in place, our Middleton store, our original acquisition, was very green and young. We basically, when Brandon and I took that over, there was one or two employees there, and it had grown to 30, 35, but everybody was green in the industry. So it just spread us a little thin on a management level, trying to solve the people problems, and we didn't have trouble getting work or filling our day for service or with sales. It was more managing people. It's going from just having 5 people in a room to having a meeting with 60 people is a lot different.
Right. And now you're running at least two different kinds of companies, right? So you have a retailer, which is totally separate. And were the other two companies kind of similar in their services, or?
Yeah, so we kept Budget Pools kind of separated from the other two because of the business model being so different. It's just retail. They do above ground pool sales, they do hot tub sales, and they do chemicals and supplies, water testing. The other two locations do those things as well at a much smaller scale. But St. Cyr is, now I would say 65% of our revenue comes from service and maintenance at that company. So,
Right. So one of the things I just wanted to point out for people, searchers or other people, and I've actually had some interactions on X about this recently about pivots and things like that. The reality is all that stuff's pool stuff, but like retail and service and construction are 3 different businesses, right?
they are. Yeah.
And so really got to think hard as you're taking on additional work or, buying another company, opening another service line. Like this is a pretty big, you're almost like starting another company or like buying a company in a different industry. And a lot of the processes aren't going to translate, right? So I'm sure you kind of found that as you're going. It also sounds like you were growing very quickly too. So tell me what you started seeing from the company as you were kind of hitting this thing, like, oh, we don't have the right people in place.
I think what was becoming clear is without having a true org chart that put a layer between Brandon and myself, it was fine when there was 5 or 6 people, they could all come to us, for their questions and their needs. But now you multiply that times 5 and you need to put that layer in there. And we didn't get that layer built in soon enough, or we didn't, identify the key players in our organization and elevate them. Maybe we thought we did, but we didn't clarify it to a degree that everybody knew that. So it was still a lot of bypassing and a lot of stuff coming to Brandon and myself.
Yeah. So you're using a hub and spoke model when you're small, right? And then there's only one hub or 2 hubs, right? And a lot more spokes. So like that's a math problem, right? So your first attempt was what, like promoting some people who were really good at doing X to run Y, and then they weren't that good at running Y. Is that, would my guess be correct there? Or?
I think it was more on us, on Brandon and I. Like there was, good options to elevate people, and we did, but we didn't give them the right tools, or we didn't.
Well, you didn't know what they were, right?
Yeah, right. We didn't really know. We were still learning how to manage people, so I'm going to train somebody else how to manage people.
Well, and the point is, you had no experience running. So you went from 5 to, like, at this point, how many employees across all 3? Do you think?
During the summertime, we get up over 80 employees. So, yeah.
So you go from running 5 to 80 employees, and you've never done that before. How would you know what to tell someone to do?
And the people that, are coming along this ride with us are just as green as we are in that respects. But it was more about, identifying to the rest of the team, putting somebody in place and saying, hey, this is your team leader. This is who you should be going to. This is the right chain of command and chain of communication to follow. I think it was more clarifying those processes, and not coming in over the top of those managers or undermining them when you're saying, hey, I'm going to give you this responsibility, so I need to let you do your thing and kind of take that step back so that the rest of the team knows the correct processes they should follow when they need help or need something.
Well, so let me push on that a bit. So do you feel like we're the right people going into the right seats? Since I know you did EOS, so we're kind of previewing that. But we're the right people going into the right seats at that point without the right processes and support?
I believe it was probably more that. It was probably more that without the right process and support.
You're lucky, to be honest, because it's a lot easier to fix the processes than it is to fix the people, right? So very, very lucky that you had enough. And like when you're talking about putting in another layer, how many people are you talking about trying to promote there?
So, again, this comes back to dividing up retail, service, and construction, right? So, all the stores now have retail managers that handle that. We have a service manager in both Middleton and Hampstead to handle the technicians. But then, we also in Middleton, where our call center is, our CSRs, need to put operations manager in place to handle the back end. And I think that's been really key. And we're even seeing it just the last couple of months by, Joel, our operations manager, putting them in place, say, okay, CSRs, dispatch, part of the technicians, all the back end customer service we need, handle that. And giving them that authority has been a game changer. So, it's kind of.
So then how many reports to like you and your partner now?
Probably about 5 or 6. Yeah.
Total.
Yeah, total.
Yeah. So you're talking about bringing in 6, people, elevating them, getting them set up. How did you approach, first of all, identifying the people? And second, then how did you, once you realized that they didn't know what to do and you didn't know what to do, what did you do?
So I think on the service manager side in Middleton, Josh, young kid, go-getter, been with us since the beginning, great technician, can diagnose any issue with a pool or spa. But it's like, okay, now we're going to pull you out of the field and have you running techs, and saying, hey, that skill set doesn't necessarily translate to this skill set. And we're getting there with him, and he's doing a great job right now. But I think it was more of being honest and saying, hey, this is a different job. Like, this isn't service manager. You're still in your truck running calls and, taking phone calls from the text. And, we need you looking over purchase orders, make sure the guys are, doing their estimates right, auditing invoices. Like, this is a desk job, not, lead tech job. Lead tech and service manager are different, and just kind of communicating that to make sure that they know what the full picture really is in that role. I think that was really important, something we're still working on. So
you knew who the people were who were going to be able to step up. And then what was the method you used to say, like, all right, this is what we need you to do? Like, did you guys just make it up as you went along? Did you take like a sort of like a consistent process approach? Was it part of EOS? How do you?
Yeah. So I'd love to say we followed the EOS track and kind of filled out all the boxes. We did create an org chart and sat down and, put our names at the top, put the managers in each position. Basically, we created, all those boxes and filled them in. But once we got to that point and we said, okay, you're going to be service manager, you're going to be operations manager, that was kind of a little bit winging it at that point. We're saying, we're going to put you in this position. We're just going to roll, and make sure the rest of the team knows what that chain of command looks like, and the chain of communication. I don't like chain of command as much as chain of communication, is going forward. But it was just like everything to this point, and I think is why we kind of hit that black hole, as you call it. It was just, flying from the seat of our pants for a little while to try to get things in place.
So how long do you think it took from kind of identifying the people to you feel like they stabilized in the role? Do you think?
Oh man, I feel like the last 12 months has really been like trying to figure out, okay, we think we know who the people are, but how do we put them in place, in this org chart, if you will, so it's most effective and we don't disrupt.
Yeah. So you're still like, are you feel like you're still actively working this?
We're still actively. I think we've stabilized a little bit over the last 90 days, but we're still active.
Okay, so we're right in it. All right. So and then just talk to us from that. So you hit that $14 million point in what year was that?
So basically, once we acquired New Hampshire in 2022, and we joined their revenue with ours, that was hitting the 14 million
Okay.
mark,
And then
that's
you
kind of where
found
we
like,
ended up in 2023.
and so you kind of stayed the same.
Yeah, stayed the same. Yeah, it was a pretty flat year.
Yeah. And what are you looking at like this year? Any sense from you guys, or do you not? It's hard to tell.
It's still, from everything we're seeing, hot tubs are off to a good start. This month, so we're hoping to gain some traction there with nailing down our processes. But on the service side, the new build side, pretty flat.
So how much of this do you think is like there's an economy issue here, right? So you're a cyclical business. I mean, do you think?
Oh, I mean, on the pool construction, totally cyclical. So yeah.
Right. So how much of this is like, hey, I'm in a black hole because we're adjusting our management and figuring out how to integrate it, and how much of it is like, hey, the economy is just doing X?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that perfect storm where we're hitting that wall of the economic conditions. Also coming out of COVID, there was 7 times more pools built during COVID than the previous 5 years or something crazy like that. So everybody who wanted a pool, we pulled a lot of that market forward, or a lot of that demand forward during COVID, and now it's resetting and renormalizing. So there's a lot of that too on the hot tub and the pool side. So we're trying to snap back.
How much do you think it's down, just like vague percentage basis? Like,
from what we've seen, on right around 20%.
the story I'm kind of hearing is like, hey, we were in this hot market. We consolidated a bunch of stuff that made sense, figured out sort of like what was different about retail versus running these locations. We're like, oh, we need a management team, right? And so like for a while, it was like all the demand in the world, and you just needed to organize yourself to meet that demand more sustainably in a profitable way, right? So do you feel like now you're still in process on that, but it sounds like you made some really good moves? So now demand is a problem.
Right. And we finally kind of got our stuff together and feel like we're on a good path to organizing our structure, our management structure. And it's like, oh, we got to go back to selling stuff now. we got to work on the sales side of this, because it has slowed down and it's not just order taking anymore. So like I said, it's that perfect storm. Like, oh yeah. And growth is expensive when you add that many employees and, those locations, and, now you're adding softwares, you're adding automation, all that stuff costs money. And then all of a sudden you get a little drop in sales there, and you're like, oh, okay, now I really got to learn to be more efficient. You got to learn to make quicker decisions and that sort of thing, which, we kind of had it easy during the COVID years because, the demand was there.
Yeah, right. And I often see this with companies, right? And it's happened with mine, is like, they're loosely functioning disasters, as Brent B. Shore says, right? And so when you go from marketing to sales to fulfillment to billing to, back end, that's like a process of the company. And you can only do so much to each process at any one time. And once you go, and it's sort of Mike Michailowicz, who writes, he wrote Profit First and stuff. He had that book, Fix This Next. And it was sort of like this idea that you're constantly going back and forth in the business, and you're fixing one thing, but that takes your eye off the other thing, and then you got to finish that and then get over here. And it's like, that's just business, right? There's, so maybe someday you get big enough where you got a bunch of autonomous people that are fixing their own thing. But
it takes a little while to get there.
Yeah. Well, what's the tenure of a company in the S&P 500? It's not that long. So even they are having trouble with it. So tell me a little bit about what you guys are thinking about on the demand side, like the generation of demand.
Yeah, I mean, I think just going back to what you just said about fixing one thing or concentrating in one area to the detriment of another during COVID, like hot tub sales. were just so easy. It was just order taking. They were just coming through like crazy. If you had a hot tub, you were selling it. So we took a lot of our focus and put it on the service side, really building up processes, integrating Service Titan, building our reviews, bringing in techs, because I was there in 2008 and I saw hot tubs go away completely, but our service always stayed the same. And in this part of the country, when you have pool openings and closing customers, they are very sticky. So growing that part of the business was crucial in nailing that down. And that has stabilized us, when sales go. So
what's the profitability profile between installation, retail, and like which one's better in service?
Oh, I don't think anything is more profitable than the service side. Pool openings, closings, maintenance, that sort of thing. Retail, because it is such a short season where we are, is tough. But if you can get into hot tubs, I mean, your gross profit on a hot tub is 45%, 40% there, gross on the retail side. But then flipping those hot tub sales into maintenance customers, I mean, that keeps us rolling, cash flow wise and profitability wise.
And that's that's an annuity, right? It goes on. And does it convert pretty well, like from sale to maintenance?
So we're working on getting better at that now. We had a really good, through 2020 and 2022, building kind of critical mass on the hot tub service side. And now we're working on, because we're seeing how sticky that service is once we get them on it, that, hey, what can we do better at time of purchase to flip them over? So we're implementing free trials of our maintenance service with depending on what level of hot tub you buy. And so we'll give you, 4 free visits and, a free drain and fill. And then you can choose to re-up at the full price after your 4 visits are up, just so they can get a taste of what that service looks like. And then they can see how much they want to take on or not. And it's been working really well.
I mean, I just can't imagine there's a more effective way to get a customer. You got to steal them from someone else. Like that seems a lot harder. So in some ways, did you do this intentionally to build that pipeline, or did it just kind of come up? Like you figured it out as you went?
We doing the free trial is a newer thing the last couple of months that we intentionally did because we saw that our organic growth for that maintenance contract service was slowing. It was kind of, parabolic almost there for a little bit, and then it just slowed up. So, okay, we're at critical mass. We really, this third truck is a little light. We need to build that up. How do we get more customers over there? And the free trial was something that we intentionally.
So it strikes me that you kind of figured out the formula here, right? It's like retail and then build the long-term annuity out of the maintenance contract. And you're making 45% margin on the retail. I mean, I guess that's just, is that gross margin or?
That's gross. Yeah. Yeah. That's gross. Yeah.
Gross. Yeah. So you're obviously paying SG&A and all that stuff, but it sounds like it's pretty profitable on the service side too. So like you get that long chain. And what would you say that, would you give a percentage on where revenue is coming from each, like retail versus maintenance versus installation or something?
Yeah, I mean, it flipped quite dramatically this year because we had that drop in hot tub sales, coming out of COVID. So, mm-hmm. I mean, for a while there, we were running, 50% retail in hot tubs to 50% service. And this year we're at service, got up to 68% of our revenue service, with some renovation, right. Included in that. But I kind of include renovations. But
you kept revenue steady.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Right. So you're able to build enough service to replace the loss. And long term, that's going to be a better profile for the company, right?
Right. And I mean, even if you're looking, years down the road, what's more valuable, the retail or recurring service with maintenance contracts and enterprise value point of view, the service, especially the recurring services, is going to be more valuable in the long run.
Right. But obviously having this free lead gen from retail is pretty nice, right?
And I feel like in our neck of the woods where we're not like the Sun Belt where it's all route based, pool maintenance companies and then separate retail stores. In the Northeast, because we have a shorter season, most of the companies here are multidimensional with a retail store, service, construction, that sort of thing. But the retail store gives us a home base for our customers to say, hey, we are legit. You can go come through our door, meet us, buy chemicals there. And that spins the flywheel for service.
So why do you think it's separated in the Sun Belt? Is it just because there's so much demand on both sides? But it seems like it's a great model, right? But I guess if you just spin up stuff and people come to you and you don't really have to work for it, it's hard. You don't innovate to like make it even easier, right? Because it's so easy already. And then have you seen profitability stay steady, or was it like going down because of all these promoting people?
Net profitability definitely took a hit this year because, like I was saying, growth is expensive, and you have to hire ahead of demand in some circumstances, in a lot of circumstances, especially on the overhead labor, to make sure we can not miss phone calls, make sure that we're getting our accounting timely and that sort of thing.
So one thing I would highly recommend, Jay, is you're right in the middle of like one of the black hole things that was really important for us was learning Greg Crabtree's. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's a CPA, but he wrote a book called Simple Numbers, Straight Talk, Big Profits. Definitely, I'll send you. Put it in the show notes. I'm telling Fame, the company that produces this. But Greg's a genius and figured out, hey, he's one of my mentors. So he figured out that labor is pretty much the biggest cost in most people's businesses, right? And people don't measure it very well because it's spread all over their P&L. So what he does is really look at total labor spend, and then he'll disaggregate that into direct labor serving the customer, and then management and admin labor in the back office. And so what he'll show is he can help you understand business service by service, like what does your labor look like. So what he's measuring is like how many dollars of revenue do I get for every dollar of direct labor I pay. That's one calculation. He calls that the direct labor efficiency ratio. And then he'll take gross margin, so revenue minus materials, but then minus direct labor, that's gross margin. Then he'll tell you how many dollars of gross margin am I getting for every dollar of management and admin labor I'm paying. And so the direct labor varies quite a bit. I've seen it all over the place. I've done some masterminds with him, so I've seen other companies. But the management labor tends to be like between $4 and $5 in gross margin for every dollar. So you can actually go look at your business, put it in this, and you could probably see your profitability getting hurt by adding more management and admin labor. And the key is, if you're going to do that, a lot of people have to hire above that, ahead of that, right? Like you said, which is smart, but you've got to have the demand come. And if you don't, and that number is deteriorating below 4 to 3, that just kills your profitability. And so you got to then investigate and say, do I have the wrong labor? Like, am I overpaying people who can't do the job? Do I have too much labor? Or is it simply that like I'm not doing enough marketing and sales and I have to shift my SG&A labor around? And then, so that's one set of things that you can get from that. The second thing I would really highly recommend is looking at the DLERs by business unit. So like one guy he had was a lawn care guy. He had commercial mowing and then residential mowing. And then he had residential lawn care, which is like fertilization and maintenance. So not like mowing. And he went and he disaggregated his units by DLER. He's making like a 1.2. Overall, he's probably making like 2 DLER, something like that. Pretty good, right? But when he looked at it by unit, commercial mowing was 1.2 and lawn care was $4 per direct labor hour. So guess what he did? He's like, forget these commercial mowing shit. I'm going to get myself some more lawn care. So he's now building out his whole green grass, no weeds campaign. Chris, just a shout out to you. But anyway, so that's the kind of power you can see from that kind of thing. And I'd highly recommend you take a look at that work. I'm a big fan of Greg, so I think you should work with him. But
I'm definitely going to check that out because I feel like we're right in the middle of that right now. Like we finally this year took service direct labor from below the line to above the line, and
right?
Exactly.
COGS.
But now it's like, okay, well, we have 3 different business units under field labor, so
right?
we now break it up.
So start looking at that. And that tells you like what you should do more of and what you should do less of. If you're going to make another acquisition, go for the one that's higher price, right? And it's not rocket science. It just helps to have these measures, right? The other thing is he will go after you if you guys aren't paying yourselves market wages and artificially inflating management and admin labor. So there are a lot of companies that come in there like, we're 30% profitable. He's like, what's your salary? $20,000. I pay myself out of distribution. He's like, no, you're a 12% profitable company that's paying dividends.
We're definitely in the weeds on the accounting side. And, that's why we're, really focusing on doing a holdco above these three operating companies so we can centralize that accounting, at least the reporting of it and, how we divide things out, because it's gotten kind of messy, when you have three separate operating companies but we're all in the same niche and we can share different things. It gets a little messy. We're like, okay, we need to reorg this a little bit.
Well, that was one of the first unlocks for me. I mean, I think the second one that I would guess you're probably going to run into if you're not in, it's a little bit more on this management layer. So it sounds like you got basic processes, job descriptions, people, communication stuff that you talked about. But what you find is if you're really going to grow past that, first of all, not all those people are going to be able to grow to the next level. And the real thing I found was that they have to start moving from like when you're a little smaller, even if you're a manager, you're basically still like the person who does it. You might have an assistant, a couple of people, but you're very heavily in it. And then as you grow past, maybe not a 14, but maybe more like in the 20s, they've got to build teams under them and they have to go through the transformation you just went through. A lot of people have trouble doing that. I found that going through the accountability chart, like implementing, are you using an implementer for EOS or are you guys self-implementing?
We've had an initial meeting with them. I've sold the team on EOS. Now I got to sell them on the implementer.
Okay. All right. So you're at the first phase. So I think you're doing 100% the right thing. So like what my feeling was, we started growing pretty quickly. And I think you can do this either when you're stuck or you're growing quickly. Or you can do it anything. But bringing in EOS, I highly recommend. I think you're making the right decision to bring in an outside person because inside people, you're gonna cut corners. You're gonna have assumptions with each other, and some people are gonna use it to protect their position. And so I think it's really important to have a good outside implementer. So highly recommend that. And really engaging in these right people, right seats conversations. And they can be very uncomfortable. That's one thing I talk to the implementer about is like, are you going to hold our feet to the fire in these conversations? Because that's where the business is going to get held up. It's like you have a salesperson who isn't running the sales department right, or marketing or whatever it is. And to be honest, I've started thinking we should apply this to our vendors. Because what if your digital marketing isn't really that good? I mean, I don't know if you're doing it. Are you doing it in-house or out or combo? Or?
We have a mix. Yeah, we have some contractors that we use for that, and then some of it's in-house. Yep.
So it's like applying that. Do we have the right person in the right seat, even if it's a vendor? So anyway, that's a big speech from me about EOS, and I think you're doing the right thing, though.
Yeah, and I think that's just kind of the thing I'm struggling with as a leader in an organization like this is the uncomfortable conversations, the uncomfortable choices that need to be made, and it's something that gotta get past to grow. So
yeah, I mean that's been my experience. It's like those things take things out of you doing it, but it's the only way you grow, and most people don't grow because of that reason. I mean, just literally, I think it's that they don't want to deal with firing people that they like, and they might even be good people and good at the job that they had, but the problem is you promote them and they can't do that job. And I say that companies can grow faster than people can grow, so it's very difficult. I mean, my company sat around at 5 million for a while until I grew enough to get it past there, and then it sat around at the next 10 to 12 million until I grew enough to get past it. And part of that growth was like making sure that other people were growing to that. And then if they weren't, getting rid of them. That takes stuff out of you as you go because you're a human being. But that's why most companies don't grow, because the owner won't make that tough decision. And it's all on you and your partner. So that's good to have a partner. You can blame him for it. But so yeah, just to offer like, yes, this is tough. And like, I think this EOS process really, if you can get them to commit to it, it'll transform that and keep you you'll get out of this black hole a lot faster through that.
First step is, we've implemented the level 10 meetings and get together every Thursday morning and go through our issues, look at our scorecard. And we've been able to really commit to that, which has been great. It's just getting,
Awesome.
Us in a room.
Are you IDSing in it?
Not as well as we should. Yeah. It's mainly like scorecard. Then it's like, what's going on? kind of thing, kind of.
All right. That's a maturity. So a couple of suggestions there. Just in my experience, implementing 90, the software platform for EOS, was really key for having, because they actually time the meeting. The agenda of the meeting is built into the software with a timer, and you've got to go through it. So I hate that, but it's really effective. So it forces discipline in the meeting. So just a suggestion there. And then IDS is the test I used on IDS, and by the way, I'm only 8 months into implementing EOS. I'm not some aficionado, but the test I used was, were we talking about big issues outside of the L10, one-on-one or in a casual conversation? And if I was like, the L10's not working. So it would be okay, we're talking about this. Why are we talking about this? This has got to go on the issues list. And if you do that a bunch of times, people start getting habituated to oh, I got to bring this up. But if you let them get out of that, they'll never use L10 effectively.
That is a great point, because I see us doing that very often. Is we're walking down the hall, walking in the warehouse, and then you start the conversation, and it's that's the big issues, because they become top of mind, right? When you're dealing with it at that moment, so you want to address it when it really should go on the designated time.
Yeah. And I'm not saying hey, you have a crisis issue on Tuesday, you got to wait till Thursday. But it's sort of even if you have to do a solve right then, I would put it on the issues list and talk about what happened and how you solved it and was it right, so that you're getting the discipline of always reviewing that stuff. Right. Well, that's great. So then on the demand side, you're doing this, let's do more stuff at point of sale for hot tubs. But anything else, are you expanding digital marketing? Are you what other lead gen kind of things are you
doing? We found that we weren't utilizing the current CRM we had on the sales side to, it didn't have a lot of transparency to see, what stage of communication we were having with our leads. So we switched to, I don't know if you've heard of Go High Level. That CRM, it's pretty popular around marketing agencies right now. And just having a switch in CRM that had mobile capabilities, texting capabilities, opened up our communication with the customer, because only 25% of people open emails. So if we're trying to respond to leads via email, we're losing 75% of them. And that's helped a lot. But also, I have greater visibility of what the sales agents are actually doing with these leads and how they're communicating. So there's now an opening for me to coach on how we lead follow-up. And it's opening up a lot on the sales side, for whether that's hot tubs or new pool leads. And I feel very optimistic that even if the market itself stays flat, our execution on our new warm leads is going to make up for that. And we could actually see growth in those areas this year.
And a warm lead comes from where usually? A inbound email, a call, you have a call center?
Yeah, inbound form fill. Yeah, so manufacturers send us leads, or we send traffic to a landing page or whatnot. So, I believe heavily in the low-hanging fruit of Google ads. So I spend heavily on Google ads, trying to max out what we can conversions there, then spread to Facebook. And then after that, go to traditional. So, mapping that process out, we work heavily on that budget every year.
A couple other things I was thinking about there. I don't know if you've looked at using offshore labor at all on response, right? Initial response. How's that?
I have not yet, but I've been researching a little bit.
I think you should really look here. I mean, I'm seeing it everywhere now, and I'd also open up the aperture, depending on what you need, certainly making sure that every call or inquiry is responded to within, X minutes or hours or whatever is key. And, I've got a guy who's running, a friend who's running lawn care or like backyard kind of maintenance and projects. And he's got people in Colombia taking sales calls. So a lot, there is a lot of like down in LATAM. I mean, there's a lot more cultural affinity to like us and good English skills. So you can kind of do some of that. And you can use your Philippines for, more back office, more technical. So yeah, I would definitely be exploring that because if you can pick up the pace of response and do it at a cheap rate, that's going to be a huge unlock for you.
Even with automated email and text and things like that, it's almost like they know. You can craft the perfect automated message, but people know it's automated. But once you engage manually, they know they're talking to somebody, it gets a much better response rate. So, our retail stores, they're only open 9 to 5, 9 to 6, that sort of thing. So we're losing a ton of speed to lead there in the evening when people are actually on their phones looking for this stuff. And so, yeah, we're ways to capitalize on that. I've been using automation, but having a live person, even if it is offshore, could definitely unlock.
I mean, eventually they're going to have some AI you can't tell the difference, but it's not here yet. So like, yeah, I think you have a very cheap, option there. And I think it's something I've seen a lot of people pursuing it. And by the way, if you're out there and you're not doing it, I mean, get on the research, and there are about 50,000 companies offering this now, and they'll manage it for you. And, you don't have to deal with cutting checks to people in different countries. And so, I mean, it's a huge, huge unlock for profitability, and just like better customer service. And
yeah, and it's even you on the service side, we're looking at ways for overflow calls because in the summer, we go from in May or June, we can have 400 phone calls in a day to our service department. To right now, we might get 30 calls today. So staffing that becomes very, very, very tough.
There's a guy on Twitter, X, he goes under the handle Guesswork Investing. And he was a former PE guy. I've talked to him in person, so I know he's a real person. And he left and bought a tree trimming business out in Pacific Northwest. And he did an entire analysis that he published on Twitter on like what they lost by, rollover calls not getting answered. And it was pretty stark. And so like, it was like I wish I had it at my fingertips, and maybe I'll email him and see if I can get it for you. But he was showing, like, I think if he started to use offshore labor, just how much more he would get out of it because he was able to answer those overflow calls, particularly when you have the seasonal thing, right? So that's definitely something to take a look at.
Just going back to growth and kind of growing into the demands, like our project manager who handles, renovations or new construction, he's out there meeting with the clients for the opening sales call in their backyard, taking measurements, writing up the estimate, sending it out. But how much money was sitting in unsold estimates just because maybe they did get the initial email and thought we never sent them the estimate. Maybe they just needed a couple follow-ups, but we're so busy on to the next one. Just like that estimate rehash process, we could see massive growth if we just had, the ability of somebody dedicated to doing that.
I totally agree with this. And the other issue I think you see there is like, it costs a lot to get, I mean, I don't know what it's looking like for you, but some of these markets, Google and Facebook are extremely expensive forms of lead gen. And if you're not capturing that lead gen, then spending another dollar there is kind of crazy. Like you could spend $1 and capture, 15 leads that were already coming in if you put it toward being better at quoting and answering people rather than putting in $1 into.
And I think it's so easy, especially somebody who, comes from being heavily involved in digital marketing. I love digital marketing. I love Google ads, Facebook ads. I was like, that's the answer. Let's just, turn that dial up. It's just so easy to fall back on. And then when you get to scale, it's like, well, how is this money being spent wisely? Like I turned off a call only spa service ad the other day because just for a phone call, I was spending $100 for a single phone call for spa service. It's like, this is silly. So, no.
Tell me a little bit about the digital ad space in kind of pool service, like home services industry. How have you seen that evolve since you're pretty into it and track it?
because we're low competition here in the Northeast, and we really never had to run ads for service because you had all the demand you could get. So we were really only running ads for hot tub sales and for retail to drive foot traffic into the stores, and to get hot tub leads. So we could sell, this luxury item that's not a need base, that's a luxury product that people want. So we would spend all of our marketing there. But then once we got up to scale on the service side, we're like, okay, we now have 10, 12 trucks running on the road that we need to keep busy. We're going to have to push some marketing dollars towards it, which we never had to do before when we were a 3-truck operation or a 2-truck operation, because we had more work than we could handle. And we still see that. Like, I'll turn off service-based Google ads in June because we're just at capacity, but I'll never turn off the retail ads or the hot tub ads because we're always trying to drive more leads and traffic into that. But service, yeah, it's like this. Up and down, up and down.
Yeah. A service is up and down, or installation.
Mainly service. Like, we'll keep install ads going now that we're in the new construction game with the new acquisition, because we want those leads coming through. But for service, it's, turn it on in the shoulder seasons and turning it off. But then it's like, well, we always want to have our name out there. We want to make sure we're being seen, even if we are at capacity. So maybe we don't turn them off, but we bring the daily spend down. So you're always looking at those and trying to look at where your capacity is, because during the summer we could add 3 more trucks this year and still fill them up. So
yeah. Do you have to sell that service customer all over again the next year, or do they usually come back?
No, they're very sticky. If you have an open close customer, the attrition level is very, very low on that.
Yeah, because there's part of me, like, when you were talking about it where you are, I was like, man, should you just do hot tubs and like hot tub maintenance, and like that's where the profit is? Or like, but it does sound like once you get a pool customer, you got a pool customer too.
Yeah, on the service side, it's very sticky, because there's only a handful of companies in this region that do it really, really well, and then there's a bunch of small 1-truck guys and that sort of thing, like there's in every market. But I feel like we've done such a good job on our Google reviews, and so now when we capture people in, our customer, I don't know of any other pool company in this area that has a full-time call center. So even though we're missing a lot of calls, we're probably answering more than most. So that gives us a lot of room.
I've mentioned this on another podcast, but there's a guy out in, I think he's in Salt Lake, Chris. Chris is going to kill me at some point, because I've talked to him a couple times on X, and like I always forget exactly where he is, but he had this whole thing about the way he owns a bunch of services business out in Salt Lake, home services. And like the way he would decide what kind of business to do today is he would literally go to markets, look at how many providers there were in X category per population, and then have offshore labor call all of them, see how long it took them to respond and quote, and then go into all the like Nextdoor, Google stuff, and Facebook groups and figure out who was like really advertising and who wasn't. And then he'd just do like a matrix, and like where the biggest hole was, that's where he'd go. So, and you guys have a pretty robust Google review program, I assume. That's sort of like table stakes in your industry, right?
It was all about automation, sticking our necks out, and we just preach it all the time. We reward our team. We have a Slack channel just dedicated to celebrating every single 5-star review.
You give in bonuses and stuff on that? And
yeah, we pay out $10 if they're on the job that got the review. If the customer actually uses your name in the review, we give you 25.
So they're kind of promoting it to the customer then.
Yeah. So if you made that good of a connection that they remember your name and put it in the review, you deserve more. But every single job, when it's completed, gets an automated request for a review.
Some people were telling me that they tell the customer, like they say, hey, if you give this guy a review, he will get a bonus. And then they're like more motivated to do it.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't had to go that far yet. It's really just creating 5-star culture as the
it's
culture.
working.
Like, hey,
so
demand that we're going to give this level of service. And if we just send that little link out there, we feel like we're gonna get it more times than we're not.
Well, that's cool. We're probably running up against our time. This has been kind of fun. But like it sounds like there are a couple things you're working on, right? Like you're getting that, you're bringing in EOS, you're going to get that back office set. You've got some new programs to build maintenance or build in service off of the hot tub stuff. And a couple other areas. So we'd love to check back in like 6, 12 months, see how you're doing, see like, what have you learned from that? What did you have to adjust? How did EOS go? Because I really want to get a sense of like, what did move the needle? Like if you start really growing again, what was it? And it would be really helpful, I think, for other people kind of going through the same thing. So
yeah, absolutely. Like I said before we got on, I feel like I'm right in the thick of it. We're all just working to figure all this growth out and really sit back and say, hey, we're at 14 million now. What does that look like?
Yeah. And the other thing I forgot to mention was like going and doing that disaggregation of where you're getting what labor costs is hit what service and your backup. I really think that'll probably open up some ideas for you.
The wheels are already turning on that.
Awesome. Well, Jay, it was great talking to you today, and we really appreciate you being on.
Awesome. I really appreciate you having me on. This has been a great conversation. Hopefully you brought some value.
You've been listening to the Small Business Mentor podcast, brought to you by Alan Pentz. For more insights on how to navigate your business through its black holes, visit @apentz on X. Don't forget to search for Small Business Mentor in your podcast app to subscribe. Thank you for joining us, and here's to your next leap in business growth.